Okay, so last time I set up certain animations and on one door, and basically I've just gone ahead and done the other one to, complete the whole thing. So what we end up with now then is a nice smooth animation of the door opening with all of the actual parts doing what they're meant to do. Minimal kind of movement on, the joints where things are kind of connected together in a fashion. But we have a nice, I think personally, a nice smooth kind of running animation here. If I actually pause that, and we'll just run through it slower. The door handle goes down, the latch part comes in, door starts to open, the other door handle is going down, and then that door opens, door handle goes back up. So it's kind of like, trying to time everything. It has to be somewhat, accurate to a degree, to make it give the illusion, I guess, that things are doing what they're meant to be doing. And, you have a double door with opener mechanisms all doing what they're meant to be doing, right? So far, so good, I think, personally. Now, what I tend to do here, though, just to kind of have everything completed, is to actually bake the animation. Because there can be, even though this looks fantastic or looks, good enough here in Blender, between here, you know, Blender will tend to fill in certain things on a curve. As it's going through this, between certain keyframes, it will calculate where things are meant to be to a degree. Um, but the Giants editor is not able to do that. It's specifically looking at keyframes to tell things where things are meant to be exactly. There may be some sort of tolerance on that, but it needs to look at those keyframes, and those keyframes need to be exact on where things are meant to be. There's no behind the scenes calculations going on. There are certain calculations here, I believe, in Blender that will fill in certain parts for you. So, and that's the same for Maya. There is a certain kind of calculation going on behind the scenes to know between this frame and this set of frames, or between 10 and 20, it will pre-calculate certain things going on in between. But the Giants editor will not do that, and therefore the Giants engine, it needs to know specific keyframes where things are. Now, obviously, there is certain between, if you have an object, a straightforward door object with no extra moving parts, and you start it at 0 rotation on the z-axis and go to whatever and keyframe it at 90 or minus 90 or whatever, there is a calculation going on there, yes, but there's no um, interpolation going on to fill in the blanks between, if that makes sense. I'm not probably not explaining that very well either, but if there's any kind of where we had on these joints up here, even even as far as Blender goes, I needed to add in a certain amount of keyframes to fill in and get them to actually join in certain areas where there was a breakage between the tails of each of the bones. But I could be wrong here. Correct me if I am wrong, but I believe Blender will do certain calculations over something like the Giants engine to fill in certain areas. It will do a behind the scenes calculation, which will fill in certain blanks. But to try and minimize possible issues that could arise from taking this from Blender to the Giants engine, I always tend to go in and bake the animation out, so it will automatically keyframe everything in between. Now you can do this. I think you could do it perhaps maybe like overkill, but I tend to just kind of experiment with it a little bit and see what works best. So in pose mode here, with all of the bones selected, I'll basically have all of my keyframes that I've set up here. And then what I would do is go to pose, animation, and bake animation. Okay. So I'm just going to, with power save, and then we'll just do pose, animation, bake animation. And you need to be in pose mode to do this, so it bakes the data to the pose, not the object, because we are using pose because we're using bones. So it needs to be a pose, not an object, right? So we have a start frame 1, end frame 120, which is correct. And then the frame steps at the moment are 1. And this is how many it will actually put in. So each step, so it will have a keyframe at 2, 3, 4, 5. It will literally do it at 1 frame step. That might be too many. So you might want to maybe step that up to 5 or whatever you think is appropriate. I might say 5 is pretty good here. So only selected bones, that's fine. I've got them all selected anyway. And all this other stuff I would just leave as it is because, yeah, I don't need that. I don't want to clear my constraints because currently I need them to make things work. Obviously, I don't want to clear parents because I need the parenting to do what I need it to do. I don't need to overwrite any current action, that's fine. And I'm not cleaning any curves out because I don't necessarily have any curves here. I'm not animating on a curve or anything like that. I would imagine that's probably what that means. Don't know exactly, but I've not played around with this too much, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And then we'll just click OK, right? So now we can see that it's added in all those extra keyframes to fill in all the blank parts, right? So I don't have to do that myself. You can do it. Blender will do it for you just by baking that in, right? So, now we can actually play the animation and see that, things are working nice. But by adding in them extra, by baking the animation and adding in them extra keyframes in appropriate places, we're just making it, I'm going to say, possibly more difficult for things to get broken. I don't know how to put that, but it just kind of reduces the possibility of errors in the export process, in my opinion. All right, so we'll just do that. So yeah, again, that's something you might have to play around with a little bit and figure out, what's going to work, as you need it to work. So yeah, one thing I have noticed here, which I hadn't noticed before when I did this, it has actually now it's knocked one off the end there. It's a bit odd. I don't know why I've done that. Don't remember it doing that the last time I did this. But then saying that, the last time I did this, I actually did it at 1 steps. So it literally had every keyframe marked. But might not make a difference. We can test it, see if it does actually break anything. But I do like to generally have a keyframe at the start and the end of the actual, so it's, but I don't know, maybe that'll be okay. It might work all right. Because theoretically that one will carry on to the end anyway before it restarts. Don't know. We'll try it. We'll see what happens. Should be all right. Okay, so what we'll do then is, let's see here. I don't actually have, I have a material, but it's got nothing attached to it at the moment. I'm not worried about textures or anything like that just yet. That would come later. This is just primarily about the animations themselves, setting the animations up, okay? So, I think what I will potentially do here is export this out now and put it into the Giants editor just to make sure that the actual animations do work the way they want them to work. So let's see, if I go to Giants i3D exporter here, by default this will say use Blender file name. I've obviously exported some stuff already here, but you want to uncheck that. Again, by default it will have a lot of this already checked, but we want obviously animations, we want our shapes file, we want to binarize the file, so it creates our animation or anim and shapes file for us. This one I think does the shapes file. This one does I don't know actually. Now in saying that, this one might do both. I think this one does the shape file and the anim file if it has one. Export shapes as transform groups if unchecked. No idea. But by default that is on anyway, so I just leave it as it is. Yeah, normals, vertex colors, merge groups, UV skin weights, all of that is by default, and I just leave those as they are. No, I don't touch any of that stuff. So yeah, as it is basically, just leave it as it is. So what I'm going to do then is click on the browse. Animation test. I think that's the folder. Yep. So we'll just do click here, animation test, and this is just going to be well, it doesn't really matter. We can just call it door animation. Right. Set that. Oh, the other thing I actually want to do also is, and this is not necessarily overly important, but when you join everything together in the XML later on, you have this animation action. Okay, so if I bring back the timeline here and go to the here, you can see under here that the animation is just called action, and that potentially is not really what you want. You want to have that named something, appropriate, I guess. So I might just do, like, for example, here, call this double door underscore source, okay? And when you actually get into the XML work, that is quite important because no two can be the same, basically. If you have multiple animated objects in the way that I'm doing it here, they need to have their own individual naming for the actual animation source code, or the animation source itself, the clip source, because you need to input that value into the XML so that it actually can clone the animation onto your static object in your placeable. So I'm just going to call this double door underscore source. That'll be fine. That's okay. Okay, so right now we will do this, we'll export it out. So if I go to here, I'm going to, in the outliner here, I'm going to right click, select hierarchy, so it selects everything. Then I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to go export selected. Okay, so then we'll go into here, and for some reason that didn't export. Interesting. Did it fail? Yes, it did. Doro1 not found. What the hell does that mean? Okay. Okay, right. I made a bit of a mistake there because what I actually did was set the armature name to door01, and that is actually the same as the bone here. The name of the bone is door01, and you can't have the armature name the same as the bone name because it's looking for a keyframe on door01 bone, and if the armature is the same name, it can't find the appropriate keyframe for it, and there isn't one because it's an armature, not a bone. So yeah, make sure you have everything named correctly, otherwise it will fail to export. But it has exported now. I can just show you that. So just so you can see, if I go into here and delete that, they go back to here, we'll right click, select hierarchy, go to the end panel here, go everything there, export selected, and it now says export successful. Okay, so yeah, sometimes naming things is not overly important, as in, as long as it makes sense to you, that's all that matters. But there are times when naming is very important, and if you don't name things correctly, you will get conflicts with each other and all sorts of things, right? So yeah, so here we are. So we've got what we want here, though. So I've got my door. Let's go Control L, add in a light here so we can actually see the thing. Let's do that. There we go. So now we can see the door, and yeah, so we just need to make sure that everything is working correctly. So you need to have the animation window open. If it's not, you just go Window and look down here, and there'll be somewhere here, Animation, and it will just open up somewhere down here, I think. These are dockable, so they can be, you know, anywhere. Might not necessarily be where I've got mine. It could be over here, wherever. But I have mine down the bottom here. So if I click on the double door mesh, you can see now we have got our clip source. So we've got double door underscore source, which is basically what I typed in here. So that's, you know, matching there perfectly fine. Then we've got all the other parts up here. So we've got my root bone here, which is basically for the frame, okay? And then all the other parts and so on and so on. So if I was to click on something like this, for example, just so we can see what's going on here, and then we just cross our fingers and hope that it doesn't break. So we click play, and as far as I can tell there, the animation is working as I intended it to. Yeah, looks good. The door handles are all doing what they need to do. Door handles go down, doors open, and so on and so on, right? So all good, excellent. So we've got, that looks like it's all working how I want it to be. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's get rid of the lights. We don't need those anymore. And we're going to go ahead and save that. That's fine. Close that down. Okay, so then the next thing we need to do is set up everything else for the building and how that's going to work. So yeah, I've got time on this one. So what we'll do then is I'm going to bring the building in here. Now I was going to do windows and all sorts. I may do that. I don't know yet. But I don't want this to be like a 50 video series or anything stupid like that. So we need to put the door basically in the correct position where we want it to be. And then set all of that up. So we go ahead and power save again. Now again, none of this has got, I've changed the color of the material, but other than that, nothing is, there's no textures or anything because I haven't done that part yet. So what I will do then is, let's see. If I go to here, what I will do is if I select, let's see, select that edge and that edge, we'll do Shift S to edge. I'm going to take this one here and snap selection to cursor. Now that should be in the correct place. Yep, that's right. Excellent. That should be fine. And then what I need to do is basically remove any animations from this. So we're just going to go to here and remove the animation. So I'm going to clear animation data. So in the outliner here, I'm just going to right click and clear animation data. So this no longer has any keyframes or anything on it, right? So if I go into here, it's nothing, won't move, won't do anything. I've removed all of that information. But what we do want to do though is keep the vertex groups where they are, because if I select the mesh, we want these vertex groups to still stay there. Okay. The other thing we do need to remove is the armature, because there's no longer, that's no longer required. So we can go ahead and delete that as well. But everything else needs to stay there as it is, because all these bones are still controlling these parts. They're just not animated anymore. Okay. So if you think back to when Well, actually, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not, because what you're doing is, in this particular scenario, is you're cloning one item on top of another item. So this is not going to be what is controlled anymore, because that's not actually, there's no armature. I'm just trying to think, actually. Let me just go back here a second. I don't think, no, I could be wrong here again. I'm just kind of going to see here. I'm pretty sure, I'm going to just try this. When I tried this before, it failed to export. Let's do select hierarchy. And what I'll do is I'm just going to put this on my desktop. So if I just do desktop, that's fine. We'll keep it as that. And we'll do export selected. Oh, it did export. Okay. Let's just check this one. It might just be the animation data that you need to remove. Let me just check this. Yes, it is. Okay. So yes, you just need to remove the animation data, not the modifier, because that's actually controlling how that all works. Because if you look at the modifier, the door here, that is bound to vertex groups. So you need the modifier to be there. Must have been something else that I had done wrong when it failed to export the last time, but when I was doing some testing or whatever else. But yes, so you need to have, all you need to do there is just basically remove that animation data, but keep the vertex groups for the mesh on there, and also keep the modifier on there, because they are all linked together to make everything work. So if you remove any one of those parts, then things will break. So just the animation data needs to be removed. Okay. So what we can do now then is we're going to export this out. So what I will do then, let's see if I can make this work the way I want it to work. So let's power save again, and then I'm going to let's right click and select hierarchy and control click on the building, because I want the building to be the origin point of everything, right? So what we'll do then is if I go here, I'm going to go to here, we'll do animation test, and I'm just going to call this, what do I call this? Well, we'll just call it building. It doesn't really matter in this particular case. So we'll just call it building, and we'll set that. And I'm just going to do export selected. So now if I go back into here, we should have a building like so. Okay. So now what I would do then is this would be my placeable. So I would create my transform group and call this whatever I wanted to call it. So we could just call this, you know, let's just call it factory. Let's say it's a factory of some kind, right? So then these middle mouse drag down will basically put those as a child of this. And then we could do something like, you know, if there's multiple parts, you could then call this, you know, viz. So then that would be a child of that. Then this would be a child of that. Okay. And you can move things around wherever you need to move them from there on. So that would be something like that. And if we go to the door here, we can then come in and check that things still do work the way they were to work. So if we go to door 01 and I rotate that, you can see the door is opening and closing on that particular transform, and so on and so on. Windows are another thing, because they would not share the same material. You would have a window glass in there, which would be a child of the door transform group. Okay, So as you rotate the door, the glass would be in here as a child of that transform group. So then it would basically move with the door. Might do that a bit, but we'll see. So yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, so then you would obviously add in all of your other parts here. So you'd have to set up your clear areas and so on and so on and so on. So what I might do is I'm going to quickly do that, put that together, because I need to create a mod desk and everything else, then XML and so on and so on. So we'll do that, and then yeah, we'll look at actually how it all comes together in the XML, and then hopefully in game.